Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Techgig webinar series. The topic for today's session is changing role of engineering leaders in a product or service company. We have with us today Mr. Pinkesh Shah and Mr. Amit Fadnis. Before I go ahead with the session, I would also like to quickly introduce Mr. Rajiv Mukherjee. He is the director of program IPL. It's a B school for tech professionals. Rajiv will walk us through the entire agenda of today's webinar, and he is also going to introduce both our speakers, Mr. Shah and Mr. Fadnis. So I am quickly now going to hand over the session to Mr. Mukherjee.
Thanks, Srilagna. So we are going to have a very exciting 1 hour of session with Professor Pinkesh Shah and Mr. Amit Fadnis. So the topic for the day is how do you transition from an engineering leader to a product leader. So we will spend the first few minutes on understanding what does it mean by a product leader. What is the role of a product leader? We're also happy to announce that we from IPL have got a special scholarship from Cisco for all the participants who qualify our written examination test. Amit Fadnis will take us through how do you transition from a technology manager to a product leader, and also set the expectation of a product leader. And we'll also spend some time in the end introducing IPL and the executive MBA program, and then it's open for Q&A. So we have today Professor Pinkesh Shah, who is the product management practice head for IPL. He's also an angel investor, spent around 15 years in US, being the VP of products for McAfee. So we're very lucky to have Professor Pinkesh Shah here. Over to you, Professor Shah.
Hey, thanks, Rajiv. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to join you guys. Certainly make this as interactive as possible. We have Srilagna also helping us with the moderation. So any question that pops up in your head, certainly don't wait till the end, and let's make this as meaningful of an interaction as possible with a two-way dialogue. As Rajiv mentioned, I've been in the product industry for a long time, and certainly would like to share a few quick insights as to what we see globally, and more importantly in the last 2.5 years of our research on what we see on the ground here in India when it comes to the product career path, the product industry ecosystem, and more importantly how the role of engineering, the role of what we call technology management or technology manager is really changing in that sense. So, this brings to the fundamental question, the topic for today as well, and obviously we're going to go into a lot more detail and have perspectives from Amit here as well, who's another amazing product leader for the last 25 years, head of Cisco, has been instrumental in creating more product leaders than just being one. And I'll share some of my perspective, but would love to learn yours. So who is a product leader in your opinion? And I don't know if you have a poll that we can make live, Srilagna. I would love to get a quick poll from the audience as to what you believe is the true definition or the most appropriate definition of a product leader.
Certainly, but as requested, I had launched the first poll, which was what company do you represent, and I can share the answers with you right now.
That'd be great.
Around 10% said IT services company, 40% said IT MNC, 40% said IT startup, and 10% said still figuring out.
Well, hopefully the last 10% of still figuring out, we can probably add the most value that you can figure it out by the end of this next 1 hour. So look forward to that.
Correct.
And do you also mind sharing, Srilagna, how many people took that poll so that we know if it's statistically relevant?
We have around 63 attendees right now who took the poll.
Got it.
Okay, so now I'm moving on to the second poll question, and as I keep the poll question open, the question will appear right up on the screen. So here you go. The question is, I'm also going to read it out loud. Who is a product leader? And the choices we have: a customer-centric technology manager, a project manager working in a product company, a module leader working in an IT services company, and never heard of it. So I'm going to keep the poll open for the next 10 or 15 odd seconds. Alright, I think we have got the answers. I'm closing the poll now and sharing the results right on the screen. Okay, around 57% say a customer-centric technology manager, 4% say a module leader working in an IT services organization, 26% say a project manager working in a product company, and 13% say never heard of it. So that was the answer we got. And back to you, Pinkesh.
Excellent. Hey, thanks a lot for sharing that. So for the folks who, again, in that last bucket of never heard of it, hopefully you'll hear enough of it today to be able to take a more informative decision, not only about what that whole career path is, but also if it's the right one, and if it is the right one, what are the necessary ingredients for you to excel in that career path. So, this question about, who is a product leader obviously is one that takes a much longer description, a much longer, deeper inspection. But at the highest level, I think it's very similar to the answers that most of you picked, which is at the end of the day, we want an engineering manager, a technology manager, an architect for that matter, who's not necessarily doing people management. Any of these individuals who work in a product company, in a company that is creating intellectual property, we want to ask them to kind of go beyond just quality code on time. Just my quick background: I was an engineering manager for almost 9 years before I switched more accidentally into product management. I was always graded. I was always evaluated on 2 parameters. Did I release the product or the code or the module on or before the time that I promised? And 2, did I have the right parameters of quality defined by certain percentage of severity 1 bugs? And while that might have been a definition that kind of was okay, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, certainly the world has evolved, and what we want most of our engineering leaders to kind of be cognizant of is really the customer centricity. Why are we doing what we're doing, and what happens once we are done with the technology that we just finished building, right? So I think customer centricity is probably one of the biggest things that kind of differentiates as one elevates oneself to go from being a pure project execution, technology execution, leader or a manager to a true product leader. Now there are other deeper ways to understand this as well, right? Do we have the customer context, which is what we talked about a little bit. What market problems are we really solving? Sometimes we forget to ask the simple question while we start solving the more complex ways of how we're going to solve it, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? Who is it for? Basics of, who is a buyer versus a user, especially for B2B companies. This is a very important aspect to understand the context of the customer as to who's going to influence and buy. Might require a different set of delight parameters than those who actually use it. What is the competitive context? What is the business context? So all of these things are essentially asking us to say, look, at the end of the day, we want our product leaders to have a much deeper context. Otherwise, what we end up doing is building the tricycle that was asked of us to build, except that, as you can see, the kid is not very happy with the tricycle that we built. So what happens? What happens when you don't have good product engineering leaders, right? What happens in the company, and what are the symptoms of what we see? So we did some ground study with several hundred companies, and we looked at kind of the repercussions of not having good product leaders, in an environment. First, I think we already talked about it: quality code on time, but unfortunately, no context. Second, we're building stuff, but the stuff is, while structurally correct, while the architecture is awesome, while the algorithms are scaling, it is essentially not creating delight. it is not as user-friendly. And the user-friendly doesn't have to be a screen or a web or a UI. We're talking about the end-to-end user experience design, how they understand about your product, know about the product all the way till they buy and acquire and install and use and refer others, right? Their entire life cycle needs to be delighting, something that doesn't happen when you don't have good product leaders, because each one of us are only focused on the silo that we're focused on. And third is, what we do is play the Russian roulette. I've done this many times in my career path. I see thousands of engineering managers do the same thing, which is, since we don't know which features are going to make the most delight, we build it all, right? So over-engineering is a direct reflection. A lack of prioritization is a direct reflection of not having that customer context as far as the product leadership is concerned. So, we talked about product leadership. We talked about the process of productizing, which is essentially we want our engineering leaders to go beyond just project execution into understanding the aspects of productizing, which itself is a process. So how does that look like, right? In a typical, company, you have an idea. The idea goes through some validation, some vetting, some executive sponsorship, internally and externally, and you have a plan. Now the plan needs to go and get through the development phase. Eventually you go and verify, qualify, make sure that the quality assurance happens, and you eventually launch and monetize. Now across that development process, there is actually an overlaying productizing process, which is asking fundamental questions. The first question is, market analysis, a series of things that one has to do to figure out, is this the right idea to go build? So the fundamental question you're asking as part of this customer insighting process, win-loss analysis, competitive analysis, is really choosing to build. How do you decide what you want to go build? Once you do that, the next step is to figure out, is this long-term making sense from a strategy perspective, from a long-term roadmap perspective, from a leverage of resource perspective? So can we build it profitably? Now, profitably doesn't mean immediate dollars. Profitably also means sometimes user acquisitions, different monetization models, which does not require money, right? Which does not is not measured by just the money. It could be user assumption, user usage patterns, and so on and so forth. The third is, can we build it right? Do we have the right resource, the right quality, and can we actually deliver on what we say we will? The fourth one is what we call marketing it right? And finally, can we sell it effectively? So these 5 phases essentially characterize any productizing process that any product company, whether you are a B2B, Cisco router, all the way to a online Yahoo property that gets updated every 4 hours, they all eventually go through a similar productizing process, a similar mindset, a similar evaluation scheme. And there's obviously a bunch of things that happens at every step. I'm not going to belabor on that or go into more details here, but we can certainly take some questions at the end. What's interesting about this productizing process is that while each one of you might not become a product manager in title, we do expect our engineering leaders to understand the interlock, understand how do you work with other cross-functional teams, how do you work with product managers, how do you work with business analysts, how do you work with project managers, engineering managers, and so on and so forth, right? So this is very important to understand that the interlock is a critical aspect of what we want and what we expect in the emerging product leader, especially when you're building something of intellectual property. Here's some ground research that I might just quickly show you as a snapshot, and a lot of this research was done with about 430 some product engineering managers, product managers surveyed in India, specifically in India for the first time. And that annual research is available on the Institute of Product Leadership's website for those of you who care for the more details. But here's very interesting insights on what we found, right? So the definition of a product leader, is also characterized as those who've got a brain of an engineer. Clearly, that's most important thing to start. The leadership skills, the soft skills to convince people, right? To get your things done, to sell the vision both internally and externally, to lead by influence. At the same time, have a heart of a designer, right? So again, another characteristic of what we want in an ideal product leader. Product leaders also, on general, are work hard, play hard type of folks. Here's some salary data that was compiled for the survey that was done here specifically for product management, product engineering in India. Interestingly enough, a lot of them had also some kind of a master's degree. 55% of them mentioned they have some kind of an MBA. And yet, what is interesting is that hiring managers are the only one from an HR perspective are using that as a filtering criteria, right? Most senior engineering managers, when they hire, might not look for just a certification, but it certainly becomes a filtering criteria to get into a product company. Here's some other statistics on a very interesting poll on how many of you from MNCs versus IT services, some interesting data on where people spend their time. And all of this is relevant data specifically in the Indian context. As you can see, a lot of the technology engineering managers, the technology engineering leaders are spending a lot more time in product road mapping than customer insighting, as you can see, as a proportionate portion of time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over back to Rajiv, and Amit is going to walk us through some very practical insights on what he sees on the ground reality, having managed thousands of people in his career path. It's also very interesting to get his perspective. So happy to take any questions now or defer it for later.
Thanks, Professor Shah. So as Pinkesh said that we're talking about a product leader, and nobody better than Mr. Amit Fadnis, who has been a product leader for the last 25 years. And not only being a product leader, has groomed a lot of product leaders out of India, on Cisco role and other companies that he has worked in. He's also a board member of IPL, and has also sponsored, announced a special scholarship for the EMBA class of 2014. So I'd like Amit Fadnis to take it over and spend some time, tell them what you were expecting on a product leader, from a product leader.
Sure, thanks Rajiv, thanks Pinkesh. Folks, good afternoon. I think you just sort of heard an excellent sort of narration on what does it really take you to be a product leader, and what are some of the attributes, what are the success parameters, criteria, where some of the product managers and successful ones are spending most of their time on, and things like that. If you really look at the ecosystem in India, we've sort of evolved tremendously over the last 10, 15 years, right? When I started my career, that was 20 years back, about 95% or 99% of the folks working in India were working for services organizations. In the sense, we were developing a lot of software, we were developing hardware, but we were sort of doing it predominantly for a product organization worldwide, right? So from our perspective, the customer was somebody who was developing the product, not necessarily somebody who was buying the product, right? From there, I think the industry has evolved significantly over the last 10, 12 years, 14 years. You have a number of sort of product organizations now in the country. There are a number of multinationals who are developing products in India. Having said that, we still feel, at least looking from my sort of vantage position, having sort of worked for a product company before, in between I worked for services organization, now again for the last 15 years I've been with product organizations in India. I still feel that the ecosystem needs to continue to evolve significantly. We don't have as many sort of success stories of successful $1 billion plus products conceived and built completely out of India. And given that, at this point in time, there are more than 1 million engineers in India who are probably developing hardware and software, more software than hardware, the fact that we just haven't been able to pull off a $1 billion plus product out of the country just sort of speaks volumes to the gap that we need to bridge as a community overall, right, from a product leadership perspective. So what I wanted to do was, just sort of look at some of the comparators, right? And a number of us have worked in product organizations. I'm sure that some of you are working, as you saw from the poll, in services organizations. Many of you are working in product organizations today. What is it like? What is it like to work in either engineering services organization or product organization, and what do these organizations really focus on, right? As I said earlier, if you are working in a services company, IT services company, most likely your customer is a product development organization or somebody who is deploying the technology that you are creating. You know, maybe you're working for a system integrator or a product development organization, right? What are some of the benefits that we see working in a sort of IT services company? First of all, you get tremendous amount of opportunities to work on multiple technologies, right? You have an option of moving from one technology to another in as short a duration as 6 months, but you could sort of do it at the time of your choosing, right? You can work for a few years in a particular technology or a particular customer base in a domain, and then sort of choose to work in a different domain. And I think that has its values, right? Secondly, obviously, from a career standpoint, you do get to work in different cultures. You have on-site opportunities as well as off-site opportunities, and therefore, it does give you a very good exposure of what does it look like working in different cultures across the world. Third, I think it gives you, because of the fact that you have opportunities to work on different technologies, it does give you, over a period of time, a very good breadth of knowledge, right? And finally, what we see is that a number of folks in the IT services organizations sort of move to management roles relatively earlier in their career, right? I mean, I think I've seen a number of folks being project leaders or team leaders at about 5-7 years experience, right, in IT services organizations. Now compare that with a product development setup typically, and you will see that obviously, in a product organization, your customer is somebody who is going to deploy your product, is going to buy your product, right, and deploy your product. There is obviously a fine difference between who is buying and who is using the product, as Pinkesh alluded to earlier, but predominantly you're working for an organization which is building products or solutions that your customers are going to deploy. One of the requirements that we see to be successful in a product setup is that in your career you do need to build a significant amount of depth of understanding on the technology and the domain that you are working on. That almost becomes a prerequisite for you to succeed in a product organization or product setup, right? Mostly the work is off-site. Essentially you do travel, to different geographies. Essentially, when you have product development setups which are spread across the world, you have different teams working in different geographies, and a lot of integration activities get co-located in a particular location, and therefore you get opportunities to sort of travel to different geographies at that integration stage of a product development activity. But generally, you will find that most of the activities are off-site compared to what you see as opportunities in a services organization. Because of the virtues of working in a particular product area for a longer time, you get opportunities to develop a significant amount of depth of knowledge in a particular technology or a product segment, right? You may be working now in cloud computing or SDN or storage as a technology or networking or telecommunications if you're a product organization. And if you're going to be a successful product leader, you will obviously have to develop a significant amount of knowledge in that domain, both from a domain and technology perspective, but also on your product line specifically. There is another angle that you develop very well as a part of product organization, which is the overall process that you follow to build a successful product, right? And that's a significant amount of knowledge base that's required for you to be a successful product leader. And essentially, you will also find that if you're in a product organization, typically most product organizations have two parallel tracks from career perspective. One is a technical track. You can become a very senior technical person. Here at Cisco, there are several folks, I would say at least 100 plus, who have more than 20 or 25 years of hands-on, technical contribution experience, right? That's because they've chosen to be on the technical ladder. Now, mind you that these guys are, very senior product leaders. It doesn't prevent you from being a product leader if you are on a technical track. And then there is obviously the management track. One difference between the services company or product company is that you typically get into management a little bit later in your career. compared to a services organization. Typically around a 10, 12-year experience boundaries when you see that people are leading teams. And the reason for that is you do expect a product leader to have a fairly in-depth understanding of the domain and the product that he's going to or she's going to handle. And as a result of that, you need to be able to spend that much time before you can actually start guiding other people or driving processes within the organization. So that, that in a nutshell is the difference between the two organizations. Now, in my career, what I've focused on when we sort of build product capabilities in India, one of the areas that we have really sort of invested in significantly is that we need to create what is called a product mindset. Okay, it's a softer aspect of a capability. Typically when you talk about capabilities, you talk about technical capabilities, or you talk about project management capabilities, or product management capabilities, marketing or sales capabilities, and so on and so forth. A product mindset is a softer attribute, right? It's really a subtle, sort of thought process that's extremely important for you to be a successful product leader, right? Be it an individual contributor or be somebody on the management side. Essentially, what we are talking about is, do you really have a very strong sense of ownership and accountability? Okay, this is one of the very important attributes because what we find often is that if you don't really own the product, right? And when you say that I own a product, I own a technology, it is very important to focus on who is your customer and what do you actually own, right? When you say that you're owning a product, you're essentially owning the customer sat on that particular product, right? You're owning how that product gets deployed, you're owning the quality of that particular product, and so on and so forth, right? You are not necessarily owning a module or a component or a hardware piece or a software piece, right? You really lose sleep over, does my product have the required level of quality to scale a very large customer deployment? What is my customer really deploying the product for? What is the business case that I am actually solving for my customer? What is the scale that I need on my product, right? What is the performance parameter? What's happening on the competitive landscape, so on and so forth, right? I think these are very essential attributes that a product leader needs to think about and worry about. And what we see typically in the ecosystem in India is that there is a very strong sense of ownership of technology, but there is relatively less sense of ownership of a complete product or the ownership of a customer, right? And this is a transition that several of us have to make, and we still continue to invest quite a bit in this area. The second aspect is skill sets and knowledge. I'm sorry, there is I just see that there is a typo on the slide. The second bullet that you see there is skill sets and knowledge, right? Now, breadth is important because you get something called association through breadth, and we'll talk about that. But it is very, very important for your organization or you yourself to have a significant amount of depth in what you're doing, right? Because if you're going to build a world-class product, you really need to be best of breed in what you do. Be it software engineering processes, be it hardware engineering processes, or be it specific technologies, right? Whatever it may be, you really need to be the best and have that skill set. The skill sets you typically categorize again into two sets, right? One are skill sets related to tools, environments, right? What are the tools available to you to do an ASIC design? What are the tools available to do a software design or a hardware design? The second set of skill sets are really related to domain. And again, there what we see is that there are fairly good skill sets available in the country today on the tools and techniques and processes to build software or to build hardware, right? If you're in the IT services business or even in the product business. But we feel that there are still gaps when it comes to leadership on products and technology, right? And that's a skill set that we need to build. And lastly, right, inherently, you need to sort of cultivate what is called the innovation DNA. And I'll refer to a book that I recently came across. It's called The Innovation DNA. It's written by Jeff Dyer Gregerson and Clayton Christensen. Clayton Christensen also wrote another famous book called The Innovator's Dilemma. Both of these are really good books, for you to go through, because they really talk about, who are the successful product leaders and what are some of the essential attributes of a successful product leader and a product company, both, right? But essentially what they talk about is that you need to develop 5, what they call discovery skills, right? And you need to be at it all the time. Now, these discovery skills are associating, questioning, observing, experimenting, and networking, right? Now, let's sort of spend a couple of minutes on these, right? Associating is your ability to sort of look at something that has been done in a totally different domain. Now, let's take an example of, let's say that there is some work going on in space research, right? You recently saw that India demonstrated the capability to design and actually deploy a cryogenic engine, right? Associating is a skill wherein you actually go and talk to somebody who is completely outside of your domain, understand what they're really working on, what are some of the challenges that they have faced and how they've solved those problems, and take the learnings from those domains and be able to apply to your domain to solve some of the customer problems or pain points or solution in a very innovative way. Now, there are several people who excel at this, and your team ideally should have at least 1 or 2 of the people who are really good at associating. Questioning doesn't need a lot of explanation, but the questioning needs to be targeted to explore specific set of answers rather than superficial questioning or questioning related to status of an activity, right? Now, typically what you will find is that most of the successful product companies, product leaders, or individuals are really good at active questioning, right? And what that essentially means is that they're asking questions to lead to very specific, in-depth insights, right, into what is it that we are trying to solve and what's the best mechanism forward, right? Now, typically you will see people saying that you should be asking at least 5 whys or 5 whats before you actually end up with an answer, right? And there are several examples you will find in this book, from about top leaders in the companies as to how they have used this skill set very, very effectively. Observing, right? There is another, very, very successful company based out of the US called IDEO, right? It's a design house, and they're a phenomenal bunch of people. There is a lot of literature that you will find on the web, in the books about IDEO as a company, because they've designed, products from spacecrafts to soaps, right, and soap boxes or trolleys, and they really are good at it, and they design world-class products. And what they will tell you is that, composition of the team should be that of very, very diverse skill set. So, if you are very like-minded people on a product group, you're necessarily not necessarily a very good product team, right? You need to have people with very, very diverse skill set, and they actually go recruit anthropologists, right, on their on their teams, because they want people to go and get a very deep understanding of human behavior before they actually incorporate as to what is it that they are trying to solve in their product. Experimenting. I really personally feel that this is an area and a gap that is the most wide gap, or a fundamental gap that we have in the ecosystem in India. We just do not, right from the college days, we do not have a culture of rapid prototyping, right? A lot of our education is based on theory, right? We don't spend time, or we don't get a lot of active assignments in schools and colleges, and therefore we build a very strong theoretical foundation, but we do not know how to apply that theory to practical problem solving, right? And that comes by very, very cultivating a habit of prototyping very rapidly, being able to show your prototype to an end user, take some feedback, right, and be able to refine your prototype as you go along, right? It's a very essential skill for you to evolve a good product, as an individual or as a company. People call it as an agile process. There are various names to it, but it's a very fundamental skill set, which is Can you play around with the tools and techniques that you have, with the small setups that you have, create a good prototype, showcase it to your end user, get some live feedback, incorporate it back in your product development cycle, and then evolve your product as you go along, right? And last but not the least, again, we are not good at it, but you need to be really good at networking. This is a soft skill, right? Do you really go and talk to people outside of your comfort zone? Do you talk to people who are not like-minded as you, right? How much time do you really spend within your team, even within your organization? How much time do you spend talking to people who are within your group rather than talking to people outside of your teams to see what they are doing, what is the problem that they're trying to solve, what are the tools that they are using, so on and so forth, right? So I think these are really good, sort of attributes for any product leader to develop. I have a very simple model that I put most of the engineers that we recruit through. It's a 3-step learning model, right? If you are in the early part of your career, you really focus on what is it that I'm trying to learn, right? What is this product? What are its attributes? How does it function? So on and so forth, right? If you're giving a code, if you're working with software, your module leader will give you some code base and say, here is a document, take a look at the code, and you sort of try to figure out what has been done, right? Or what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Then you get to the next step of saying, okay, fine, I understand what we're trying to do here. Now let me really get into the details of this code and understand how does this code really work, right? So spend a considerable amount of time really understanding the functioning of the system, understanding the functioning of hardware, understanding the functioning of maybe an electrical motor or whatever product that we may be working on. But what I've seen is that a lot of times, right, we especially in India, we stop at this second stage. We feel very happy about the fact that I now get it, right? I have gone through this, ton of code that is in front of me. I understand inside out of how it has been implemented. And we feel very happy about it. We get rewarded for it. We get promoted for it, right? The problem is, that does not make you a product thinker because you haven't really elevated yourself to the next step of saying, okay, I understand what is it that we are trying to solve. I also went through the code or the design, or the functionality of the system, and I know how it has been done. But then I don't get myself to ask, why has the problem been solved the way it has been solved, right? And this why is a place where you'll find most of the undocumented knowledge, right, or undocumented parts of the system that you need to learn. When you talk to senior people in the team, most of the conversation needs to be not on what or how, but on really why things have been done the way they have been done, because that will tell you what were the other alternatives that were considered and why those alternatives were not picked, or when they were picked in the earlier systems, what happened to them? Did it work well? Did it not work well? And if it did not work well, why did it not work well, right? And that's the real knowledge that you need to, sort of gather as you go through your career, because once you get that, then when you get to design a product, you will make the right choices right up front. What we see most often is that people are really, really good at executing, but when it comes to decision processes, right, when it comes to saying, there is a system that I need to design, what are the design choices in front of me? We falter quite a bit because we have not gone through this process of experimenting, and we haven't gone through the process of asking the whys when we learn the system that we are on, right? This is a very big gap that I see we having as a part of our team. So, I would say that if you're a sort of engineering leader today, want to graduate to be a product leader, these are some of the essential attributes that you should really focus on. Now, the product ecosystem is very large. If we are engineers, right, we sort of often mistake engineering to be a predominant part of a product ecosystem. And fundamentally, that's not right, okay? Engineering does not constitute even 15% of the overall product lifecycle, okay? There are several other teams that you need to be knowing about. There are partners in your ecosystem. There is a complete supply chain. There is a manufacturing setup. There is a customer and the customer environment. Even within, within your product organization, you will have product management teams, your go-to-market teams, your sales organization, marketing organization, so on and so forth. And your deeper understanding of how each of these stakeholders work, what's important to them, why do they do things the way they do, right? What questions do you need to ask of them when you embark on a product development effort is a very, very sort of important base of knowledge that you need to generate as you work through your careers. This is a topic in itself. I think we will cover it as a part of a subsequent sort of webinar. I feel that this is one of the very important topics that we should discuss. A lot of you should sort of discuss and debate within your teams too, because this is another knowledge base that is not very readily available in India at this point in time. We have very good engineers. We don't have engineers who really understand how the entire ecosystem works. What does the rest of the ecosystem do for them, and what type of questions they need to ask, right? Yeah, I think I'm not going to spend too much of time. This is really a continuation of the previous slide, which just says that if you are a product team, there is a large ecosystem around you that you need to be just cognizant about. A light-hearted note, we talked about ownership and accountability, right? But typically, this is a part of the mindset problem that we have, right? We may be risk tolerant, but we are generally not failure tolerant. And when you talk about experimenting and creating rapid prototypes, one thing that we always tell our teams is that let the prototype fail, and the earlier the failure, the better it is in the whole product cycle, rather than the prototype failing or your product failing very late in your product cycle, right? So traditionally we are not failure tolerant, right? In India, we are not good at delivering the bad news. We are not good at saying no right up front. And this is a very subtle thing that we need to sort of develop as a product ecosystem from a India perspective. So in a nutshell, right, if I'm looking for recruiting somebody in a product organization, right, the chances are that many of you would have worked in engineering organizations, in services organizations. These are some of the skill sets that we look for. These are some of the attributes that we look for, right? Depth of knowledge, hands-on skills on tools and processes. Are you really, really good at it? It doesn't matter which tool you have used. But when you use a tool, if you are coding in a particular language, do you really get the language really well, right? Do you understand the nuances of it? Do you know what is optimization? Do you know what is scalability in that particular language, right? Do you know what are the performance attributes of that language? So on and so forth. Have you really got to the depths of it, right? Conceptual understanding of what you have done, right? It's not good to know, as I said earlier, what is it that the system is doing or how the system is implementing. But if you want to get to a conceptual level, you really have to answer all of the whys, right? Good problem solving skills, right? This is something that comes out of habit. It also comes out of experimenting. It comes out of prototyping, and therefore your ability to sort of have that thought process is important, right? Ability to think out of the box, right? Can you really go talk to somebody in the cement industry? Are you curious of knowing how things work? And can you take that knowledge and apply it to your domain and your area? Communication and influencing skills, it's one of the very, very important soft skills, right? Because you want to develop a product which is going to be globally successful. Most likely you will have to evolve a global, influence a global ecosystem, and your ability to, culturally and cross-culturally communicate effectively is very, very important. Ability to work in teams obviously is important because, none of the products today are simple enough that you can design on your own. You have to work through a fairly large stakeholder base to get anything done. And if you can collaborate well, if you're a good collaborator, fundamentally you'll be very successful. And then last but not the least, all of this needs passion around continuous learning, right? Never ever get satisfied with the knowledge that you have. The more dissatisfied you are with the knowledge that you don't have, the more successful person you will be overall, right? Be it product development or any other field. So, another sort of cartoon, but, this is something that we see as a behavior, from a lot of leaders, right? Hey, when the project goes well, the credit is mine. If it fails, the fault is yours, right? And again, it goes into teamwork and collaboration, your ability to influence, your ability to collaborate is something that you need to sort of develop as a personality, that you have to be able to part with credit very, very well. And the more you part with credit, you'll win more friends, and you will create an ecosystem around you, which will be very, very helpful to you in your careers, right? So let me stop there and see whether there are questions, comments for me or for Pinkesh. So we'll sort of take some questions at this time.
Thank you,
Amit, for your...
Yeah, thank you so much, Amit, and thank you so much, Pinkesh, for the presentation. Please let me know if you want me to read out the questions, though I have already assigned them to you.
I think, Sulatna, you can maybe read out the questions.
Okay, I will start with this question. Gaurav Agarwal, he is asking, I'm working in a services company. Does moving into consulting stream, is moving into consulting stream similar to the product leadership role, as it involves technical and communication skills?
Okay, so let me take a shot at it, Pinkesh, and you can add your comments. But look, several in a consulting organization, right? Several of the attributes will be common to the product organization, but there are some attributes which are different, right? So first of all, if you want to get into consulting, you're going to consult on a particular domain, right? And obviously, the requirement of having a depth of knowledge in the skill set so that you can actually value add to a customer is very, very important, right? The way in which it differs is that, instead of applying that knowledge or the depth of knowledge to actually building something, you are really trying to sort of understand what a problem statement is and guide someone or give your advice as to what the right approach is, right, to solve that problem. That's typically a consulting role. So your ability to see a big picture, your ability to see what is it that needs to be solved, your ability to visualize multiple alternatives, and your ability to articulate effectively why a particular option should be taken, what are some of the cost parameters, downsides and upsides of it to a customer, so that your customer in a consulting environment can make the right choices for his or her organization. That's the type of skill set that you need, right? Fundamentally, the skill sets are same. The way you apply them in a consulting organization is different from the way you apply them in a product organization. Pinkesh, you want to add anything?
I think you summarized it pretty well. If there's only one word that I can add, which is the additional ingredient you would need to excel in a product environment from a consulting world, is experiential. More hands-on, demonstrable capabilities of doing things with a more hands-on approach, then sometimes you don't need that as much in the consulting world.
Right.
All right, thank you, guys. Next question is from Anil V. He has asked this question to Amit. He's saying, at the business case level, what is the contribution of engineering and management as per your experience?
Yeah, so I think the engineers have a lot of contribution to make, because let's look at what do we mean by a business case, right? Business case has two dimensions to it typically. There may be multiple dimensions, but fundamentally when you look at it from a product perspective, business case has two dimensions. One is, what is the size of the TAM, or the total addressable market space, right? How big is the customer base that you can go and capture? What are the essential attributes of that particular product? Now this is sort of outward facing. The second aspect of a business case is that for your business to be, for your product to be profitable, right? And for it to have a sustainable differentiator, what are some of the essential attributes that the product should have? And typically one of the attributes that is given is that, hey, for us to be successful, given where the competition is, what should be my total cost of goods? Okay. Now there are definitions of a cost is different from the cost or bill of material. So you have the bill of material and you sort of add to it to get to a cost. But what is it, right? Second is, what are the performance parameters, right? Third, how do you want to actually scale this product from a roadmap perspective? So you develop something, there is a business case around it. what happens to this particular product 3 years, 5 years down the line, right? I think, that is where the engineers and the managers really play a very, very important role in any sort of business related discussion, because they then decide based on those parameters what's the best approach to build a product, right? I'll give you an example closer home from a networking or a telecom domain. Typically, when you get a system spec, or you get a business case for creating a particular system, one of the decisions that you have to make is that, am I going to use merchant silicon that is available from many silicon vendors, across the globe, or am I going to build a custom ASIC for this particular product, right? Now, this is where you need a very strong interlock between engineers and business managers, because the decision on that depends a lot on what's going to happen in future, not just today, right? On this particular product line. So I guess engineers play a very, very important role, especially the senior engineers who can sort of look at the breadth of the problem as well as look into future and see how the technology or the competitive landscape is going to evolve and what's going to be our sustainable differentiator over a longer period of time.
Just to add one quick thing, and I think maybe also segue into another question that we saw on the screen from Kranti, which is, what is the product development versus product management difference? And I think those two questions are related to some extent, right? Because product management is not just a role or a title. Product management is a process, the productizing process, and every person who works in a product company invariably is involved in the product management process or the productizing process. So whether it's the idea, the concept, the business plan, even sales enablement. So I think one thing that we see as a big myth that sometimes our engineering managers live under is, look, that's not my role, that's the product manager's role to tell us what we should do, and we just go do it at the best possible quality at the lowest possible time. And I think it's a very narrow way of looking at it. It's a very ineffective way. In our opinion, in the next 5 years, to be more blunt, those project execution engineering mindsets and those engineering leaders are going to become extinct because everybody can manage projects. Skill sets have become fairly high. Everybody understands technology now. So what is the additional value add that you have as an engineering manager? So keep the distinction between product management as a mindset, product management as a process, and product management as a title or a role, right? An engineering manager should definitely be more involved in the product management process, even though the title is not as high, right? Or the title is not something he or she holds.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Pinkesh. That's in fact one of the major success criteria for a successful engineering manager today, right? I mean, not just a product manager. As you said, it's a process. It's not a particular function or a job that a person does. There is a simple question here which says, what is GTM? GTM is your go-to-market, right? Or go-to-market strategies. The question is from Sandeep. Okay. Now, typically, when you develop a product, you also need to be very cognizant about how are you going to take this product to the market. And you will find that there are multiple vehicles that you have, as options, right? In the telecom or networking world, one of your options may be that, okay, you are going to deploy this product through service providers, right? So there are service providers who are deploying end-to-end services. They carry your product. So your buyer is going to be a service provider. Your buyer is not going to be the end customer who is actually going to deploy that product or use that product, correct? So this is where, it goes back to Pinkesh's earlier comment about who is buying and who is using the product, right? And understanding that and how do you actually get the product out in the market, there are a lot of strategies that come into play there, and those are called GTM functions or GTM strategies or the go-to-market strategies.
So there was one more question from Nitya on how smooth is the transition from engineering manager to product manager with 20+ years of work experience. So this is a tricky one, right? like I said, I think product management is a mindset. You should be able to do that no matter what your experience level is or what role or what industry you're in. Now, obviously, with that high level of years of experience, can you still play the product management role? Absolutely. You might have to go and, have the ability to learn, but more importantly, unlearn. Because what we see in a lot of our participants, by the way, the average years of experience that we see in our 5th batch, which is now running for product management, the average years of experience is about 9 to 10 years. And what we find is in the batch where we have participants, very senior participants with 12, 15 years of experience, the biggest ability that we want them to have is not about learning. It's about unlearning. So, and that's because, for years we've been successful with what we thought was the right set of ingredients. And all of a sudden, now we're being challenged. So as long as you have that, ability to learn, but more importantly, unlearn, Nitya, this is absolutely doable for you to kind of transition into that role with the right, skill sets that you can demonstrably learn and apply.
I think we can take 2 more questions before we wrap up today's session.
Do you want to just go ahead and choose it so that we are not the bad guys, Srilagna?
Certainly, though I have already assigned the questions to you. Hold on, let me quickly pick one. Okay, so Anil is asking again, what is the role of relationship manager in a service and also in product development company? Any differences?
Well, I don't know what you exactly mean by relationship manager, right? Because essentially what we see in the product organization is that the more senior you are and the more responsibility you have from a product perspective, you are always a relationship manager at the same time, right? As I said earlier, one of the discovery skills for being a successful product leader is networking, okay? And your ability to build a sustainable network of people around you who are not like you, right? Who carry very different skill sets, who come from very different domains, who get a lot of different types of values to the organization is very, very important. So I would say, there is nothing like a relationship manager. I mean, I know that there are some services companies who may have a relationship manager to manage relationships with customers, and many people play that role. But for you to be a successful sort of leader, either in a product organization or in a services organization, you yourself should be a successful relationship manager. You really have to tend the relationships and make sure that you keep them up. In any relationship, even on personal side, right, you will see that unless you have something to give, right, you won't be able to sustain the relationship. The relationship has to be symbiotic, right? And unless you make the relationship symbiotic, wherein both of you are gaining from each other, that relationship is not sustainable. I think I would just say that as of now, right? I don't know whether Pinkesh, you have any other thoughts on the relationship manager aspect.
No, I mean, as a title, I don't think we see that as much of a title in the product company because usually relationship managers in services organizations are more client-centric. And one of the biggest difference that we see that I think Amit also alluded to, but if I can maybe give a little bit more one-liner to further emphasize or re-emphasize the point, in a services organization, you are more client-centric. In a product organization, you are more market-centric. And so while this is not just a clever use of words, there is a deep divide and a deep meaning between these two models. In a services organization, the relationships manager's job is to make sure that the client is happy, which means sometimes you do things which might not be market scalable, but just to satisfy that one customer, that one client, you might still go ahead and do that, take that decisions to go and prioritize it. In a product company, that's usually a lethal mistake, right? Because your job as a product leader is to figure out a way to delight the market, not the client, right? So from that perspective, I think the word relationship manager is quite different between the two domains.
I think there is another question from Anil that I'll take, which is, what is agile, right? What's your experience with agile development as of now, and how is it moving ahead in product development setup, right? So look, what we have seen through our experience, and you can sort of find this in a lot of literature that people have documented going through the agile process. Agile is a mindset. This is not about just the process or the tools or the storyboarding and the scrums and those type of things, right? Essentially, agile is directly related to the discovery skill that we talked about earlier, which is experimenting, right? So your ability to have a conversation about what is needed to be done, putting a quick prototype of it, showing it to your end customer or your stakeholder, and being able to sort of take it through iterations and refinements till you actually get a finished product, right? That process or that mindset of going through those steps is agile, right? So I don't want you to confuse, a lot of people come to me and say, well, I think we should apply agile as a methodology, let me go to a training program, right? And what we often tell people is that, look, the training program will be really, really useful when you really understand how you're going to have the agility in developing a product and getting it to the market, right, in the fastest possible way. So, by the way, a lot of companies are very, very successfully, applying this agility stuff from a mindset perspective. There is a lot of development that is happening in cloud, in big data analytics, in a lot of application domains where this is very directly applicable. But what we see very interestingly is that it is also applicable in embedded systems companies, right? If you just leave out the hardware design aspect of it, more or less the entire software stack today you can build in an incremental way and refine it as you go along by demonstrating incremental functionality to your customer, right, or to a stakeholder. This is something that's definitely catching on. There is a lot of skill set available. There is also a lot of good training available around it, but I just don't want people to jump into training without really understanding what is it that it's going to be used for and what is it really fundamentally, right? And it's a mindset more than anything else. Okay, I guess we are probably out of time.
Yes, I think on that note, we will end today's session, though we have more questions which remain unanswered. But the attendees can always come on techgig.com and post their queries, and all of you can come and participate in the discussion on our discussion forum. That is one option. The other option is that they can also send in their queries directly to us or to your official email ID. So if you want, you can share your social networking handles, or you can share your professional email ID. Else they can directly send the questions to us.
Do you want to?
Yeah, if you want, you can share that one slide.
Okay, can I just say mine?
Sure.
Will you sort of type it out on the window? It's very simple. It's asp@cisco.com.
AST at
cisco.com.
cisco.com. Okay, I have shared the same with all the attendees, and I would like to thank all of you, Pinkesh, Amit and Rajiv, for giving this presentation, taking time out today on a Tuesday afternoon. And yes, we would be sharing the questions with you offline. And for all the attendees, you can log in tomorrow by afternoon to get the recording of today's session. So those of you who missed out part of the session can come back on techgig.com by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you so much, all of you. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Shilanga.
Bye.